Now let's move ahead to another very important section, which is section 135, which talks about corporate social responsibility. So this is again a very important section wherein we are going to discuss about what is corporate social responsibility and how will the company expense out for this purpose and all of that. So it is again a little vast section, however very important from examination perspective. Talking about CSR and its requirement. Let's understand this with help of an example. The reason of why CSR is included, why does a company have to spend on certain activities apart from its regular business? The reason is very simple. It is because the companies, they are growing using the nation's resources. So it is a way of giving back to the community, giving back to the nations. So it basically works on this parameter that the big companies should not only grow with an intention to earn profit, not only grow with a profit motive, but also become nation builders. And when will they become nation builders? There's some social responsibility which is given on the shoulders of the company, which the company has to comply with. So generally, whenever we talk about a company, we are only talking about profits, we are talking about expenses, we are talking about incomes, but there is one responsibility which is there with the companies, and that is their social responsibility. As a corporate working in the country, what are you giving back to the community? What are you doing for the society? That is what the corporate social responsibility of an entity talks of. So here CSR is basically corporate social responsibility, and it talks of the social responsibility of the corporates. What does social responsibility mean? Social responsibility is the responsibility towards society. How are they responsible towards the society? And not only that, it is the way of giving back to the community. And not only giving back to the community, they are doing what? They are becoming a part of nation building. So when we talk about CSR activities, many big companies, they are indulged in different CSR activities, and in fact there are a few companies who have their own foundations made specifically for their CSR activities. So if I take an example of Reliance Industries Limited, Reliance Industries Limited have their own Reliance Foundation which is specifically made to carry out the CSR activities for the company. So Reliance Foundation is basically providing healthcare facilities, providing food, and also making sure that the underprivileged people in the society, they get basic resources. So that is what is done under CSR activities. So when we talk about social responsibility, what are the different things which are covered here? The different things which are covered under social responsibility is basically providing education, healthcare. And you see, during COVID-19 also there were several companies which were indulged in helping people during that particular time. So that was also a part of their CSR expenditure which the companies made. So it includes education, healthcare, environment protection, providing food, etc. to different people in the society. So when we talk about CSR activities, so like Reliance has Reliance Foundation, similarly Tata also has Tata Foundation. Again, they also take care of the CSR activities in that company. And similarly, the other companies, they have also indulged in CSR activities year on year basis, and in certain situations making CSR expenditure is also mandatory for companies. We'll understand how and in which situation. But what is the main motive behind CSR activity? It is giving back to the society. So the main motive is, since we are using so many resources from the nation, since we are using so many resources from the society, let us do something for the society as well. So Reliance has its own Reliance Foundation, which is specifically made for the purpose of carrying out all the CSR activities. And similarly, there's Tata Foundation. Infosys also indulges in CSR activities. All the big companies, you take the name and every company is doing something or the else for CSR in order to you take the name of any big company for that matter, and every company is indulged in CSR activities. So that is the main intention of why CSR has come in. Now when we start with section 135, we'll first have a look at a few important definitions, few important terms which we should know about before we go into the section, because these are the terms which will be used in the section, and if we do not know the meaning of the term, it will become difficult for us to understand the section ahead. So what we'll do now is we'll first understand the basics of the section, and then we'll move ahead to the section, to the main context of the section. All right. So talking about corporate social responsibility. So the first meaning which we have to understand here is corporate social responsibility. Now what does it mean? So CSR means the activities undertaken by a company in pursuance of its statutory obligation. Statutory obligation means what? It is an obligation which is imposed by the company. It is an obligation which is imposed on the company by law. Statutory obligation laid down under section 135 of the Act with the provisions contained in this rule, but it should not include the following activities. So there are specific exclusions from the activities which cannot be termed as CSR activities. So what are CSR activities? These are the activities which a company carries out in accordance with its statutory obligation which is laid down under section 135. However, it does not include certain activities. What are they? Let's understand. So activities which are undertaken in the normal course of business. If you are doing a normal business transaction, say sale, purchase, any agreement, contract, whatsoever it is, if you are doing it in the normal course of business, then it is not a CSR activity. For an activity to be a CSR activity, it has to be linked to the CSR objectives. If it is not linked to the CSR objectives and you are doing a normal course of business activity, then that is not a CSR activity. So if you are carrying out any activity in the normal course of business, normal business transaction, that is not a CSR activity. Then activities undertaken by a company outside India, except for training Indian sports personnel representing any state or union territory at national or international level. So if you are taking up any activities outside India, see, the main intention of CSR is what? We are building our nation. If you are carrying out an activity wherein you are helping some other country flourish, then you cannot call it a CSR activity, except when it is for the training of Indian sports person. However, in other situation, if you are carrying out an activity, say, of improving healthcare sector or providing education to the underprivileged or protecting environment in a country outside India, that will not become your CSR activity. You are using resources here in India and you are providing CSR activities outside India. No, the CSR activities which are being carried out should be carried out here in India only. So if there is any activity which is carried out outside India, then that will also not form part of the CSR activity of the company. Then any contribution of amount directly or indirectly to any political party under section 182 of the Act. Okay, companies can give donations, companies can contribute to political parties. However, if you are giving some donation to a political party, you know how it is used. So, do you think giving amount, contributing some amount to a political party will mean that we have given back to the society in some way? Given back to the society is a different thing altogether when you are giving something to the political party, right? So when you are contributing something to the political party, that cannot form part of your CSR activity. Apart from it, activities benefiting employees of the company under as defined under clause K of section 2 of Code of Wages 2019. So if it is for benefiting the employees of the company, you are only helping your own employees, again it is not a part of your CSR. Activities supported by company on sponsorship basis for deriving marketing benefits for its products or services. So you are providing sponsorship. So you see there are different sponsors when IPL happens, and then there are different sponsors whenever a league happens or match happens, or even for a small exhibition which is held, say there are different people who come up and sponsor it. What is the main intention behind sponsoring these events? Advertisement. So as in when you see there's an ad in any IPL match, the advertisement which comes up is either Jio or any other sponsor's advertisement first. So what is happening? It is going there in the viewer's mind. Similarly, if your company is providing sponsorship, why do people provide sponsorship? Because it is a way their product or service is marketed. The main intention behind providing sponsorship is marketing of that organization. So if a company is providing sponsorship just to make sure that they gain some business from the marketing, that is not a CSR activity. Apart from it, activities carried out for fulfillment of any other statutory obligation under any law which is in force in India. So some other act tells you to do something and you do it as per that act and say, no, this is my CSR activity. Not allowed. So say for example, you have 5 questions to answer. You have 5 questions to answer and you write the answer to question number 4. However, the answer was actually of question number 6. Now it is up to the examiner, right? He is going to understand, okay fine, this is by mistake written as question number 4, however the answer is of question 6. Do you think the examiner has so much time? He will not even check which question you have answered or which question have you misplaced in writing. He is not going to check all of that. He will just check the question number, he will check your answer. If he finds it is not correct, he will just give you 0. However, whatever answer you had written was actually a correct answer for question number 6. Do you think you will get marks for it? Definitely not. So similarly here as well, my company had to perform CSR activities. However, this is as per my Companies Act. CSR activity I have to do as per Companies Act. However, say there's some other XYZ act which asks me to do the same activity. So what I do is, I do the activity because it is obligated under this act and say that no, this is my CSR activity. Not allowed. Cannot do so. So this is what the this is what the definition of CSR says, that these are certain things which are not called as CSR activities. So let's quickly make a flowchart for this. So CSR activities, exclusions. What are the activities which are completely excluded? First one is activities in the normal course of business. Then any activity which is carried out outside India. However, there's one exception here, and what is that? If you are incurring the activity for training of Indian sports personnel who is representing India at any national or international level, then that is an exception. Then if you are contributing any amount to a political party, if you are giving any amount to a political party under section 182 of the act, then that is also not your CSR activity. Then if you are activities benefiting your employees, benefit of employees, then that is also not your CSR activity. Apart from it, if you are providing any sponsorship, and the main intention behind sponsorship is marketing of your products and services, again not a CSR activity. Apart from it, if you are doing any act under some other statute or under some other statutory obligation, then that is also not a part of your CSR activities. So these are some specific exclusions from the meaning of CSR activities. Now let's move ahead, let's have a look at another definition, another meaning. So what is a CSR committee? So this is the CSR committee which we form under section 135. CSR policy, what is a policy? See, whenever we do something, we make a policy with whenever we do something, whenever we want to carry out some function for that matter, we make a policy. So similarly, CSR policy is what? It is a statement which contains what? Which contains the approach and direction which is given by the board of the company, taking into account the recommendation of the CSR committee. So what does the CSR policy contain? It contains the statement as to what should be the approach and what are the directions which have been given by the board of the company with respect to the CSR activity which the company has to do, and this is in accordance with the recommendation which have been given to the board by the CSR committee, and includes guiding principles for selection, implementation and monitoring of activities, as well as formulation of an annual action plan. So what does CSR policy state? States the approach and direction which are given by the board and as per the recommendation of the CSR committee. And apart from it, the CSR policy also states that how the annual action plan has to be made, what are the things which have to be taken into consideration when the CSR policy is being implemented. So rules with respect to selection, implementation and monitoring of the activities. So it states what? The principles for selection, implementation and monitoring of the activities which can be carried out as your CSR activities. Then what are administrative overheads? So what are administrative overheads? This means the expenses incurred by the company for general management and administration of corporate social responsibility functions. So what are admin overheads? These are the expenses which are incurred by the company for the general management and administration of CSR functions, but they do not include the expense which are directly incurred for designing, implementing, monitoring and evaluation of a particular CSR project or program. So these are your general management and admin expenses of the CSR functions. What is an international organization? So it is an organization notified by the central government as an international organization under section 3 of the United Nations Act, to which the provisions of the schedule or to the said act apply. So this is an international organization which is again notified by the central government. What does net profit mean? Now net profit means the net profit of the company as per its financial statements which are prepared in accordance with the applicable provision. However, it should not include what? Any profit arising from any overseas branch or branches of the company, whether operated as a separate company or otherwise, and dividend received from companies in India which are covered under and complying with the provisions of section 135. So net profit, two exclusions from net profit. Net profit shall not include what? Profit of overseas branches. it will not include the profit of overseas branches, and it will also not include the dividend which is received from other Indian companies which are complying with section 135. So profit and dividend. Dividend from which companies? Other Indian companies which are complying with section 135. So which are also indulged in CSR activities. Then what does ongoing project mean? Ongoing means what? Something which is going on, something which is continuing in nature. So ongoing project means a multi-year project. So multi-year means it is not going to finish in 1 year, but it will take several years to complete. So it is a multi-year project which is undertaken by a company in fulfillment of its CSR obligation. So multi-year project undertaken by company for the purpose of fulfilling its CSR obligation, having timelines not exceeding 3 years. So it should not exceed 3 years, not greater than 3 years, excluding the financial year in which it was commenced. So year 1, say if it is commenced, so their timeline will be until year 4, 3 years. And such project was initially not approved as a multi-year project, but whose duration has been extended beyond 1 year by board based on reasonable justification. So what does it say? 1, it is a multi-year project. Why did we take up this project? This project was taken up for fulfillment of CSR obligation, and the timeline of this project does not exceed 3 years, excluding the financial year in which we are starting it. Also, those project which was initially not approved as multi-year project, but whose duration has been extended beyond 1 year. And why did the duration extend? The board has given reasonable justification for that. So those type of projects are called as ongoing projects. So the projects which are still going on. What is a public authority? So public authority is the authority as defined under 2 clause H of Right to Information Act. So these were certain important definitions with respect to CSR. These are certain terms which we will come across several times when we are going to do this section 135. Let's now understand the situation wherein a company will have to constitute a CSR committee. So when a company has to constitute a CSR committee, there are some requirements which have to be fulfilled, and only after that we will require a company to constitute a CSR committee. Now what are the requirements? Let's understand. So when we talk about constitution of CSR committee, every company which has net worth of rupees 500 crore or more, or turnover of rupees 1000 crore or more, or net profit of rupees 5 crore or more. If any of the 3 conditions is satisfied, then the company will have to comply with the requirement of constituting a CSR committee. And this committee and this requirement has to be complied with during the immediately preceding financial year. So what are the limits specified? Let's just write them down. So what is the situation wherein a company will have to constitute a CSR committee? When its net worth is greater than or equal to rupees 500 crore, when its turnover is greater than or equal to rupees 1000 crore, or when its net profit is greater than or equal to rupees 5 crore. So when you look at these limits which have been given, so what do you understand from this? These are really big companies which are making good profits, and since they are making good profits, it is their responsibility to give back to the society, to give back to the community, and that is the reason why this net worth, net turnover, net profit limit has been assigned. see, if you are earning well, you can give something to the society. If you're not earning well, if you're not doing good, you yourself are struggling, what are you going to give to the society, right? So that is the reason why these limits have been specified. So net worth greater than or equal to 500 crore, turnover 1000 crore, net profit 5 crore. If any of these three conditions are satisfied, any, it is not and condition, it is or condition. Either net worth or turnover or the net profit. If any of the three conditions is satisfied, then the company will have to form a CSR committee. And which year's net worth, turnover and net profit are we going to see? Of the immediately preceding financial year. Immediately preceding financial year. So we are going to have a look at the net worth, turnover and profit of the net profit of the immediately preceding financial year in order to determine whether the company is required to constitute a CSR committee or not. So let's take a few examples and let's understand different situations wherein whether the company will have to constitute a CSR committee or not. You can make a note of these examples in your book. We are doing this for practice. So these are different companies. Let me just write down the net worth, turnover and net profits figures, and then we'll determine whether these companies will have to constitute a CSR committee or not. So So let's now identify in all of these different situations whether the company will have to constitute a CSR committee or not. So first situation, let's see. So the net worth of Clean Private Limited is 200 crores, net worth condition not satisfied. Turnover is 500 crores, turnover condition also not satisfied. Net profit 2 crores, net profit also not satisfied. Neither of the three conditions is being satisfied, so this company will not be required to constitute any CSR committee. Then next, Jogi Limited has net worth 800 crores. Is it more than 500? Yes, it is. So this condition is satisfied. It has turnover of 900 crores. Again, this is not satisfied because the turnover limit prescribed is greater than or equal to 1000. Net profit is 10 crore. This is satisfied because it is more than 5 crores. So yes, Jogi Limited will have to constitute a CSR committee. Why? Because its net worth is more than 500 crores and its net profit is also more than 5 crores. Then SRK Limited, net worth 500 crores, so exactly equal to 500, no problem. It says, the provision says greater than or equal to, so it is okay. Turnover or exactly 1000, again satisfied. Net profit exactly 5 CR, satisfied. So yes, this company will have to comply with the 135 requirements. And then there's Chili Milli Limited. So net worth 490 crores, not complied with. Turnover 980, not complied with. Net profit 4.9 crores. There is no rounding off which happens here. If it is 5 crore, then yes. If it is not 5 crores, no. So again, not required to comply. Then there is ARK Private Limited, net worth 300 crore, less than 500, not satisfying. Turnover 700 crores, less than 1000, again not satisfied. But yes, net profit is equal to 500 crores, so this condition is satisfied, as a result of which yes, this company will have to constitute a CSR committee. So see, if any one of the condition is satisfied, the company will have to constitute a CSR committee, and the amount can either be greater than or equal to, even if it is equal to the limits which have been prescribed. Even if it is equal to the limits which have been prescribed, it is okay. It has to be either greater than or equal to. So you can make a note of this example. You can just pause in the video and make a note of the example, so that the next time you come back to this provision, it becomes easier for you to recollect. So if any of the three conditions satisfied, we are going to constitute a CSR committee. Which financial year's net worth, turnover and net profit are we going to look at? Immediately preceding financial year. Then what does it say? It says every company, including its holding or subsidiary and a foreign company having its branch office or project office in India, which fulfills the above criteria, will have to comply with the provisions of section 135. So every company, including holding company, subsidiary company, foreign company, all of the companies which satisfy this condition, they will have to constitute a CSR committee. They will have to comply with section 135. Then a company having any amount balance in the unspent corporate social responsibility account as per 135 subsection 6 shall also constitute a CSR committee. So this is one additional condition. So if your company has an unspent corporate social responsibility account maintained, then if you have any amount balance in that situation also, you will have to constitute a CSR committee. However, there is an exception. What is that? Where the amount to be spent by a company under subsection 5 does not exceed 50 lakh rupees, the requirement for constitution of CSR committee shall not be applicable, and the functions of the committee shall be discharged by board of directors. So we have now understood wherein a company is required to constitute a CSR committee. However, there is one exception where the company will not be required to constitute a CSR committee. What is that? Wherein say there is section 135 subsection 5 which talks about the amount of contribution towards CSR. So there is a minimum limit which is specified by the Companies Act itself, that is this much percentage of your net profit you will have to contribute as towards CSR. However, section 135(5) has some percentage given. Now there is this exception which says that if the expenditure which you are making under section 135 subsection 5 is not exceeding 50 lakhs, if it is not exceeding rupees 50 lakhs, then in that situation you will not have to constitute a CSR committee. In that situation, your board of directors can themselves discharge the functions which a CSR committee does. So this is one exceptional situation. What does it say? It says where the amount spent by a company under subsection 5. Subsection 5 is what? Subsection 5 is amount of contribution. Talks about amount of contribution. under subsection 5 does not exceed 50 lakh rupees, the requirement for constitution of CSR committee shall not be applicable. So, if your CSR spend is not exceeding 50 lakhs, then the requirement for constitution of CSR committee will not be applicable, and the functions of the committee, which committee? CSR committee, in such situations will be discharged by the board of directors of the company. So, where no CSR committee is required to be constituted, then in that situation the functions of CSR committee will be discharged by the board of directors of the company. So, this is what section 135 subsection 1 talks of. Moving ahead, let us now talk about how will the composition of CSR committee be done. So, CSR committee of board consists of 3 or more directors. So, it consists of 3 or more directors, out of which at least one director shall be independent director. So, what does it say? CSR committee of the board, it shall consist of 3 or more directors, out of which at least one director shall be an independent director. Now, there is a flow chart which we will make on this particular point. Composition of CSR committee. So, what does it say here? CSR committee of a board which consists of 3 or more directors, out of which at least one director shall be an independent director. So, if the company has an independent director, when we talk about composition of CSR committee, what does it say? It says 3 or more directors and one shall be independent director. So, this is in a situation where the company has an independent director. If the company has an independent director, then no problem. But say if the company does not have an independent director, then what? If no independent director, then what? Then in that situation, the CSR committee will only comprise of the directors of the company. Okay. Now say it is a private company which is required to constitute a CSR committee, and it is a private company which has only 2 directors. Then what? Then in that situation, both the directors shall form part of the CSR committee. So, 2 directors will comprise the CSR committee. So, 2 directors, since there are only 2 directors, both of them will together make the CSR committee. Now, let us talk about a foreign company. What if it is a foreign company? And let me take it down here. What if it is a foreign company? Then in that situation, whoever is authorized here in India, those people will form part of the CSR committee. So, this is one very important point. So, there is one small chart on this. Yeah. So, when we talk about CSR committee, what does CSR committee consist of? CSR committee consists of 3 or more directors, and at least one shall be an independent director. So, 3 or more directors, at least one independent directors. If the company is not required to appoint independent director, then what? Then CSR committee shall consist of 2 or more directors. So, generally 3 or more directors, at least one independent directors, but if the company is not required to appoint an independent director, then it should consist of 2 or more directors. If it is a private company which has only 2 directors, then the CSR committee should constitute with those 2 directors. If it is a foreign company, then CSR committee should comprise of at least 2 persons, and one person shall be specified under section 380 and another person nominated by the foreign company. So one shall be person who is specified under section 380. 380 will study in chapter 11 and the other person should be nominated by the foreign company. So this is how the composition of CSR committee will be done. So when we talk about CSR committee, 3 or more directors, 1 independent. If no independent director is required to be appointed, then 2 or more directors of the company. If it is a private company which has only 2 directors, then those 2 directors shall constitute the CSR committee. And if it is a foreign company, at least 2 persons shall be there, 1 under section 380 and the other will be nominated by the foreign company. So this is how the CSR committee will be constituted. Now talking of what is the duty of the CSR committee. So the duty of the CSR committee, 1 is to formulate the CSR policy. So they are going to make the CSR policies. Not only that, they will also recommend the amount of expenditure to be made. So they are going to formulate the CSR policy and also going to recommend the amount of expenditure which is to be made and also monitor the CSR policy. So first what? Make the CSR policy. Formulate means make the policy. Recommend the amount of expenditure which is to be made and then also monitor as in take care of whether the policy is being implemented properly or not. So CSR committee shall formulate and recommend the board an annual action plan. So what are they going to recommend? An annual action plan. What will it include? It will include the list of CSR projects or programs, the manner of execution of the projects and programs, how the utilization of funds and implementation will happen, monitoring and reporting mechanism, and the details of need and impact assessment. So these are the contents of what? These are the contents of annual action plan. These are the contents of the annual action plan, which is made by whom? Which is made by the CSR committee. Now let's discuss about what shall be the duties of the board during making the CSR policy and what are the functions of the board with respect to CSR. So like we've understood that the company, it forms a CSR committee and we have also understood what are the duties which the CSR committee performs. Let's now understand what will the board do in relation to CSR. Now, the making of policy is the committee's responsibility. Once the committee makes the policy, it will send it to the board. Now, what will the board do? They will approve the CSR policy. See, no decision in a company can be taken without the board's approval. Board's approval is required. Say, for example, if you want to take any decision about your home, you will have to consult your parents first. Similarly, here in a company form of organization, if any decision has to be taken, then the board of directors shall be consulted. So here in the given situation as well, the board's duty is to approve the CSR policy. They'll have to approve the CSR policy. If they are okay with whatever policy has been formulated, they'll approve it. However, if they have any reservations, then in that situation, what will the board do? They'll decide whether to approve the policy or not. So what is the board doing? They are approving the CSR policy. Then what? They will disclose the contents of CSR policy in their report. So what is the board going to do? They are going to disclose the contents of the CSR policy in their report. So if you remember the board's report of Reliance Industries Limited, there was one head which spoke about the CSR policies and activities. Apart from it, they'll place the policy along with composition of committee and projects approved on their website. So all of this shall also be kept at the company's website as to what is the policy formulated, which committee, who are the members of the CSR committee, etc. at their website. And also they'll ensure that the CSR activities are undertaken by the company. See what generally happens. Let's take your example. Now, when you prepare a study plan that I am going to follow this, I'll complete so and so subject in so and so time, and by the time exam comes, I'll be very well prepared. I know every student makes a study plan, but the question is, how many of you follow the plan which you've made? And how much percentage do you follow the plan which you've made? There would be someone very little, there would be a very little percentage of students who actually follow whatever plans they've made. However, what happens? We tend to deviate from the plans, because what happens, as soon as we start implementing the plan, we have some distractions which come between. The biggest distraction is our phone, right? So what happens? We have made a plan, but implementation is a problem. So in that situation, what can you do in order to make sure that your plan is implemented? You either tell your parents that I have made so and so plan, so you help me, or you keep monitoring my plan if I'm doing as per my plan or not. Or if not parents, you can go to a friend of yours and tell him that this is the plan I've made, and you can monitor my plan at regular intervals. Keep asking me if I've completed it or not, if I'm going as per schedule or not. So what happens? See, when there's someone who's monitoring your plan, you are answerable to that person. And when we are answerable to someone, we tend to do the work which we have assigned to ourselves. Similarly, when the CSR committee is making CSR policies and undertaking CSR activities, the board has to ensure that the CSR activities are being done by the company in a proper manner and as per the plan which has been made. So if you remember that the CSR committee also makes an annual action plan. So that annual action plan also has to be implemented. Who will make sure that the plan is being implemented properly? It is the board which is going to make sure that the plan is being implemented in a proper manner. Then, now moving ahead to another important point, we will now discuss about what is the amount of contribution which has to be done by a company towards CSR activities. Till now we have understood that a company is required to undertake CSR activities. It is mandatory in case of companies who cross the threshold limit. So we have understood all of that. But what is the amount of contribution which has to be made? Now say if my company is making a net profit of 5 crore and I tell, okay fine, I'll spend 1 lakh towards CSR. Is that much? Fine. The answer to it lies in the next provision. So here we will now understand what is the minimum amount of contribution which has to be made by the company towards its CSR activities, and what are the other rules and regulations regarding contribution of amount towards CSR. So if we talk about the minimum contribution every year, the minimum contribution has to be 2% of the average net profit of the 3 preceding financial years. Let's understand this with help of an example. Let's say there's a company in financial year 1, let's write down 3 years, year 1, year 2, year 3 and year 4. Now in year 4 they have to make CSR spend or CSR contribution. In order to determine how much amount they have to spend in year 4, what should be the minimum amount of contribution, what does the company have to do? The company here will have to take in the net profits of the past 3 years. Let's say the net profit of year 1 was 5 crores, net profit of year 2 was, let's say, or let's not make it 5 crores, let's say it was 1 crore. In year 2 it was 2 crores and in year 3 it was 3 crores. So 1 crores, 2 crores and 3 crores respectively was the net profit in the past 3 years. So now what does it say, that what should your CSR contribution be? It says 2% of average net profit of the preceding 3 financial year, immediately 3 preceding financial year. So what will be the average? 1 plus 2 plus 3 by 3. So we'll take the average net profit of the preceding 3 financial year, and 2% of that should be the amount of CSR contribution. So what does this point say? Let's see. The minimum amount. This is the minimum amount. Okay, it can exceed this much. It depends on what company wants to spend. But minimum, they will have to spend 2% of the average net profit of the immediately preceding 3 financial years. So if I want to check the CSR, the minimum CSR spend which I have to do in a particular year, I'll have to take what? Average of the net profits of the preceding 3 financial years and take 2% of that amount, that shall be the minimum contribution towards CSR. It is the minimum contribution, not the maximum one. Now a question would come up here. You would say, what if I have incorporated my company in this year only? You do not have any data, then it is okay. Let's say, what if it is a situation wherein only 1 year has passed by since the company's incorporation, then we'll take only last year's net profit into consideration, and say only 2 years have lapsed since the formation of company, then we'll take only 2 years profit. See, the provision tells us that you have to take average of net profits of immediately preceding 3 financial year. But what if the company has been incorporated and only 2 years have passed by? Then we'll take only 2 years profit, will not take 3 years profit. Very simple. However, when we have data of the last 3 years, we'll have to take into consideration the data of the last 3 years. Alright, so how are we going to calculate the minimum contribution? What is the minimum contribution? 2% of what amount? 2% of the average net profit of the immediately preceding 3 financial year. This should be the minimum amount of CSR contribution which the company is doing. Now, where should the company be spending? So the preference should be to local areas and areas around where the company operates. So where should the company make the spend, or where should the company make the contribution? The preference should be given to local areas or the areas around which the company is operating. And there's one more point which says that the admin overheads, if you remember, we have seen the definition of admin overheads in the previous lecture. So admin overheads shall not exceed how much? 5% of the total CSR expenditure for that financial year. So there is a limit which has been imposed which says admin overheads should not exceed, so shall not be greater than 5% of the total CSR expenditure. Should not exceed 5% of the total CSR expenditure. Let's say the total CSR expenditure is 10 lakhs. So what is the limit of admin overheads? So admin overheads cannot exceed 5% of 10 lakhs, which is 50,000. So admin overheads should not exceed 50,000. Equal to 5% is okay, it should not exceed. It shall not exceed 5% of the total CSR expenditure of that financial year. Now, what will happen if some amount is not spent? What if the amount is not spent? Then what? So the company will have to give reasons of why they did not make the CSR spend as per the minimum amount, minimum limit in their board's report, and transfer the unspent amount in the fund which is specified in Schedule 7. So let's say there are two situations which may come up here. One, the company has spent the total minimum amount required. Second, the company did not spend the amount. If the company does not spend the minimum amount, it will have to give reasons of why it did not make the minimum amount of contribution towards CSR in its board's report. And whatever is the unspent amount, that will be transferred to a separate account which is specified under Schedule 7. So Schedule 7 gives us a list of all the CSR activities which can be carried out by a company, and there's also a fund specified there. So it says whatever is the unspent amount, you can transfer it to that fund which is specified. But within how much time are you going to transfer? Within a period of 6 months from the expiry of the financial year. So within a period of 6 months from the expiry of financial year, the unspent amount has to be transferred to the fund which is specified in Schedule 7. And what if there's excess amount spent? Let's say the amount of contribution required was only 10 lakhs. However, the amount spent is 20 lakhs. In this situation, what have you done? You have made an excess spend. Excess amount has been spent. Then set of such numbers of succeeding financial year in such manner as prescribed. So what will happen? You have spent an excess amount. So this excess is how much? There's an excess of 10 lakhs. This excess amount of 10 lakhs we will use to set it off in the succeeding financial years. Now let's say in year 1 we had to make a CSR contribution. Minimum amount of CSR contribution required was, let's say, 10 lakhs. However, the amount which we have spent, actual spend, is, let's say, 15 lakhs. So what is the excess amount here? 5 lakhs. There's an excess spend of 5 lakh in the given situation. So what will happen? This 5 lakh of excess spend will be adjusted in the year 2's CSR contribution. So as may be prescribed in the rules, we will do this adjustment as prescribed in the rules. However, this excess spend can be utilized for the purpose of setting off the succeeding year's contribution. So that is what this point says, that any excess amount can be used for such number of succeeding financial years and in such manner as may be prescribed. So we can use the amount for the succeeding financial years. Now, there's one more point, where the company has not completed period of 3 financial years since its incorporation, then what? Net profits during such immediately preceding financial year shall be considered. So like I've told you, that if the company has been formed only 2 years ago, then we'll take only 2 years net profits into consideration for the purpose of determining what should be the CSR spend. Then, if any surplus is arising out of CSR activities, so if there's any surplus means what? Excess income over expenditure gives us surplus. So if any surplus arises out of the CSR activities which are carried out, what will we do? We will consider it as a profit of our company, right? No, you cannot. It is your CSR activity, and if any surplus is arising out of CSR activity, it cannot be considered as a profit of the business of the company. So it shall not form part of the profits of the company. Any surplus arising from the CSR activity will not form part of the profit of the company in any situation and be plowed back into the same project. So it can be utilized again for the same project, or transfer it to unspent CSR account, or transfer such surplus to the fund which is specified in Schedule 7 within a period of 6 months of the end of the financial year. So what will happen if any surplus is arising? If there's any surplus arising, what can be done? One, either use it for the same project, or transfer it to unspent CSR account, or transfer it to the fund specified in Schedule 7. However, in how many months do we have to transfer? Within 6 months from end of financial year. We'll have to transfer it to the fund which has been specified in Schedule 7. This is for what? This is any surplus arising out of the CSR activity. Can you treat it as a part of your profit? Cannot be treated as a part of profit. Cannot be treated as profit. So this is what has to be kept in mind wherever there is any surplus arising out of the CSR activities. Now, what will happen if the company fails to spend the minimum prescribed CSR account? What is the minimum prescribed CSR account? It is 2% of the average net profit of 3 preceding financial years. See, I am using short forms here, but in examination you have to write it completely. Complete words have to be written there. Alright, so what if the company fails to spend the minimum amount? Like we've understood already, they'll have to specify the reasons where in the board's report. So if the company is not able to spend, say, minimum amount, they'll have to specify in the board's report the reasons of why they could not spend the minimum amount. And where the unspent amount relates to projects other than ongoing projects. Ongoing projects are what? Projects which go on for multiple years. So if the unspent amount, it relates to projects other than the ongoing projects, then the unspent amount will be transferred where? It will be transferred to the fund which is specified in Schedule 7 within how much time? 6 months from the end of the financial year. Or if it relates to an ongoing project, see, if it is not relating to ongoing project, transfer it to the fund which is specified in Schedule 7. However, if it relates to an ongoing project, then what? It shall be transferred within a period of 30 days from the end of the financial year to a special account. So, in such a situation, if it relates to an ongoing project, where is it going to be transferred? It shall be transferred within 30 days from the end of the financial year to a special account. So, this account is to be opened by company in that behalf for that financial year in a scheduled bank, and that is called as unspent corporate social responsibility account. So, what is the account called? Unspent CSR account. And such amount shall be spent by the company within 3 financial years from the date of transfer. So, within 3 years from the date of transfer, the amount in that account shall be utilized. And if the company fails to do so, then the amount will be transferred to the fund which is specified in Schedule 7 within 30 days from the completion of the 3rd financial year. So, what does it say? Let's understand this with help of an example. Let's say in year 1, the company had to spend, let's say in year 1, company had to spend, say, rupees 10 lakh minimum contribution which had to be made by the company was, say, rupees 10 lakh. However, the amount actually spent was only 7 lakh. So, what has happened here? There is an amount lesser than the minimum amount which is spent by the company towards its CSR activities. Now, if this is a situation, what will the company have to do? So, at the end of the year 1, when the company is making year 1's board report, what will the company do? It will give reasons in the board report as to why they could not spend so and so amount. Now, let's say this 10 lakh there could be 2 situations with respect to this amount of 10 lakh which had to be spent. One, it relates to an ongoing project. Second, it relates to a project other than ongoing project. So, one, it relates to an ongoing project. Second situation is what? It relates to a project other than the ongoing project. Now, if it relates to a project other than ongoing project, then what will the company do? The company will transfer unspent amount will be transferred to what? Transferred to fund under Schedule 7. So, unspent amount here will be transferred where? It will be transferred to fund which is specified under Schedule 7. And within how much time? 6 months from end of financial year. So, say if the year 1 ends here, then within 6 months the amount shall be transferred to the account specified in Schedule 7. This is in which situation? This is in situation where the amount relates to a project other than ongoing project. However, if the amount relates to an ongoing project, then what? If the amount relates to an ongoing project, then what? In that situation, the amount will be transferred to an account, but the account will be a special account opened by the company with a scheduled bank, and the account will be unspent CSR account. So the account is special account called as the unspent CSR account, and within how many days the amount shall be transferred? 30 days of end of financial year. So here it was taking 6 months, but here it is taking only 30 days to transfer the amount where? To the unspent CSR account for ongoing project. Now, for how many years will the amount lie here in the unspent CSR account? So this amount will be there in this unspent CSR account for 3 financial years. It will be there in the unspent CSR account for 3 financial years. So if the amount is transferred on this date, then year 1, year 2 and year 3. So year 1, year 2, year 3. So it will be there in that account for how many years? For 3 financial years. However, if the amount is not utilized in these 3 financial years as well, if the amount is still unspent, then what? Then in that situation, the amount will be transferred again to the unspent, to the special fund specified in Schedule 7. However, in this situation, the amount will be transferred within how much time? Within 30 days from the end of 3rd financial year. So within 30 days from the end of the 3rd financial year, the amount will be transferred to the account specified in Schedule 7. So this is how the unspent amount will be dealt with in case of CSR. So you can make a note of it or write it down in your own words as well. I always have this habit of asking students to write things down in their own words, because if you write things down in your own words, it is easier for you to understand than you copying whatever we give. See, you are all CA students and I know all of you all are very smart, and in a paper like law, unless and until you have good writing practice, things become difficult. So that's the reason why we always emphasize on this fact that doing a little bit of writing practice for this subject as well as audit is very important. Helps you in understanding the legal language and also using the legal language when you are writing things down. So this was with respect to how will the unspent amount be dealt with. Moving ahead, what if CSR expenditure is being done for creation or acquisition of a capital asset? Then what? So a company can spend CSR funds to create or acquire a capital asset which must be held by. So this capital asset must be held by which company? A Section 8 company which is registered as a public trust or society which has some charitable objectives, and also a CSR registration number. So where can we acquire this capital asset? Can be acquired for which type of company? For a Section 8 company which is registered under Section 8, which is registered with a charitable objective and also has a CSR registration number. And the beneficiaries like self-help groups or collectives or any public authority. So this capital asset should not be created for the company's own use, but rather for a Section 8 company or public authority or other beneficiaries. Now, let's talk about how will the implementation of CSR activities be done. So the board shall ensure that the CSR activities are undertaken by company itself or through. So the CSR activities can be done by the companies themselves, or they can be done by the company with the help of some other people. Like what? Connected charitable entity. So say it could be a situation wherein the company has collaborated with some other charitable entity and they are together doing a CSR activity, or entity established by government. They are collaborating with a government entity and carrying out the CSR activities, or any statutory entity or charitable entity with 3 years of experience. So The CSR activities can be implemented by the company either on its own or through any other charitable activity, charitable entity, any government entity, any statutory entity, or any other charitable entity which has 3 years of experience. Every entity which undertakes any CSR activity shall register itself with the central government by filing form CSR 1 electronically with the registrar. So every entity which wants to carry out CSR activities, that is, which is involved in carrying out CSR activities, they'll have to obtain a CSR registration number, and for that they'll have to apply to whom? They'll have to apply to the central they'll have to apply to the registrar in form CSR 1 by filing form CSR 1. Now this form shall be signed and submitted electronically by the entity and should be verified by a CA or CS in practice or a CMA in practice. And on submission of this form, a unique CSR registration number will be generated by the system. So any entity which wants to carry out CSR activity, they'll have to obtain CSR registration number. Just like a company's incorporation process where the company obtains a corporate identification number, similarly, if an entity has been established for the purpose of carrying out CSR activities, then that entity will have to obtain a CSR registration number. Now, in order to obtain a CSR registration number, which form are they filing? Form CSR 1. This form is filed with the ROC, and upon receipt of it, this form shall also be digitally verified by a CA or CS or a cost accountant in practice. And upon verification, the registration number will be granted. Now, moving ahead, companies can collaborate with other companies for CSR project. So it is not necessary that if say Tata wants to carry out CSR activities, it has to do everything on its own. No, they can collaborate with some other companies for the purpose of their CSR activities. So they can collaborate with other companies for CSR projects, but each company's CSR committee must be able to report separately on their respective contributions as per the rules. Now what happens generally, you might have seen this during your school or college times. So there was a group of 4 people which was made who were assigned a particular project. Now generally what happens, in that group of 4 people, there are only 2 people who are working on the project and there are 2 others who are simply enjoying the perks of the project which is being done by the other 2 people. The marks were allotted to all the 4 people equally. However, the entire hard work was put in only by 2 people. So in this situation, what has happened? Can you clearly justify that the other 2 people, what work they have done? No, they have not done anything. How will you say what is the amount of contribution they have made to the project which was assigned? They have made 0 contribution. So similarly, say 2 companies, A Limited and B Limited, they come together to carry out a CSR activity, and let's say everything is done only by A Limited alone. That is not how the CSR activity has to be carried out. Both the companies should be able to report their contributions separately. Both the companies have to make sure that their minimum spend is being done. Both the companies shall make sure that their minimum spend is being done in the situation. So even if 2 companies are coming together for performing a CSR activity, their CSR committees, they shall be able to report separately about the contributions and the activities which are carried out by both the companies. Then collaboration is okay. So the committee shall be able to report about the contributions separately. Then the company's board must ensure that CSR funds are used as approved. So the board of directors of the company, they will have to ensure that the CSR funds which are being utilized, they are being utilized as per their approval, not any amount more, neither any amount lesser than that. So the fund utilization has to be as per approval, and the CFO or person in charge of finance must certify the proper utilization of funds. So the board must make sure that the funds being utilized are approved, and the CFO or the in charge of finance has to make sure that the utilization of funds is happening in a proper manner. And for ongoing CSR project, board must monitor the progress as per the approved timelines and yearly allocation. So say there is a project which is ongoing, multiple year project, then in that situation the board has to make sure they'll monitor what is the progress of the project and whether the progress is happening as per the plan or not. That is what the board is going to do. Now once the CSR committee is formed, once CSR expenditure is done, this also has to be reported. So when we talk about reporting, so the board's report of the company, they are required to form a CSR committee. They must include an annual CSR report with specific details. So if there is a company which is required to constitute a CSR committee, make CSR expenditure, then the board's report of that company shall clearly state the CSR report with specific details about what are the activities which are carried out and what are the CSR spend which they have done. And for a foreign company, CSR report must be included in the balance sheet which is filed by the company. So if it is an Indian company, board's report and every other thing, board's report shall contain the CSR reporting. However, if it is a foreign company, then their balance sheet shall be filed, the CSR report shall be included in the balance sheet itself. Then there is something called as impact assessment. Now what is impact assessment? Every company having average CSR obligation of 10 crore or more in 3 immediately preceding financial year shall undertake impact assessment through an independent agency. For what? For CSR projects having outlays of 1 crore or more and which have been completed not less than 1 year before undertaking the impact study. See, impact means what? What is the impact of the CSR activities which are being carried out? Whether they have a good impact on the society, whether they have a good effect, good result. So impact assessment is done by whom? Impact assessment is not done by all the companies. It is done by companies whose CSR obligations are of 10 crore or more, are of say greater than or equal to 10 crore in the immediately 3 preceding financial years. So what will these companies do? These companies, they will carry out, they'll appoint an independent agency, and this independent agency will carry out an impact assessment of which projects, of the CSR project which were of a value 1 crore or more, not of small CSR projects, but rather of CSR projects which had value of 1 crore or more and which have been completed not less than 1 year before the study, which means it has been only 1 year since the project has completed. So this impact assessment is carried out by whom? It is carried out by an independent agency. Who appoints this independent agency? The company appoints it. Which companies are required to carry out impact assessment? Companies whose CSR obligation was 10 crores or more than that in the immediately preceding 3 financial years. And which projects will be assessed? Projects whose outlay was 1 crore or more and has not been completed and 1 year has not lapsed since its completion. So which have been completed not less than 1 year before undertaking the impact study. So which have been completed not less than 1 year before carrying out the impact study, which means there has been a significant time which has passed by since the implementation of that CSR policy. So impact study is for what? What is the effect or the result of the CSR implementation for that particular type of project, whether that project is fruitful or not. Now why is this impact study being done? This impact study is being done in order to make sure that the CSR activity which was carried out or the CSR project which was done, was it fruitful or not, and whether the company should continue doing projects like that or not. So for that purposes this impact assessment is done. Again, this is for companies who have very huge CSR obligations, not very small companies. Then impact assessment cost can be counted as CSR spend. So the amount which we are spending on the impact assessment shall also be counted as CSR spend, however limited to 2% of the CSR expenditure or 50 lakhs, whichever is higher. So since we are including it in the CSR spend, the amount limits prescribed for impact assessment is 2% of the CSR spend, 2% of CSR or 50 lakh, whichever is higher. Now these kind of questions can be asked for your small MCQs. These are very small and very important points which can be asked by the institute for MCQ type of questions. Can be asked for a case study based question as well. However, chances of asking these small points for MCQs are higher. Now if there is any default in compliance, then what shall be the penalty? If it is the company, the penalty is twice the amount required to be transferred to fund which is specified in Schedule 7 or unspent CSR account, or 1 crore, whichever is less. So 2 times the amount which has to be transferred to Schedule 7 fund or the unspent CSR account, or 1 crore, whichever is less. And for every officer in default, it is 1/10 of the amount which is required to be transferred to the fund or the unspent CSR account, or rupees 2 lakh, whichever is less. So always see the fine or the penalty which is imposed on the company will always be on a higher side than what is imposed on the officer in default. So with this we have now completed the topic of CSR. However, there's one small point which I would like you all to give a reading on, and that is the activities which have been specified in Schedule 7. Now, you'll not get a direct question on this. However, what happens is on different activities which have been written here under this Schedule 7, they use one activity in the case study based question which they ask you. So for that purposes, you can give these activities a read all the activities and understand what are the activities which are allowed for CSR. So let's quickly just walk through this. I'll do this in a quick manner because this is not something which you have to remember, but yes, you do have to recollect this when a question is asked. So eradicating hunger, poverty, malnutrition, promoting healthcare, sanitation, including contribution to the Swachh Bharat Kosh, then promoting education, special education, employment, vocation skills, gender equality, empowering women, setting up homes and hostels for women and orphans, old age homes, daycare centers, facilities for senior citizens, and reducing inequalities which are faced by backward groups. Environment sustainability, ecological balance, protection of flora, fauna. So this is all for environment. Also contribution to the Clean Ganga Fund, protection of national heritage, art and culture, restoration of the historical buildings, setting up public libraries, promotion on development of traditional art and handicrafts. So measures for benefit of armed forces, war widows, their dependents, armed police forces, paramilitary forces, training to promote rural sports, nationally recognized sports, Olympic sports and Paralympic sports, contribution to the Prime Minister's Relief Fund, PM Cares Fund, etc., contribution to incubators, research development projects, etc., and there are different authorities or bodies which have been named in here. And then the rural development projects, slum area development, disaster management, including relief and rehabilitation and reconstruction activities. So these are some of the activities which have been specified under Schedule 7 as to these are the activities which can be carried out as CSR activities. So what did we understand under CSR section 135? Let's quickly summarize section 135. So section 135 was about CSR, that is the corporate social responsibility. Okay. So what does section 135 say? So under section 135 we started with a few definitions about CSR, administrative overheads, what are the activities which shall not be included in CSR activities. So we have seen the activities which shall not be, like activities carried out in the normal course of business, or activities which are in the form of contribution to political parties. These are not CSR activities at all. And then we saw the definition of administrative overheads, ongoing projects, public authorities. Then we understood one very important point, which was which company is required to constitute a CSR committee. So which companies? So there were 3 limits which were specified. 1, every company, and it includes a foreign company as well, holding company, subsidiary company, foreign company as well. Every company whose net worth is greater than or equal to rupees 500 crore, or whose turnover greater than or equal to rupees 1000 crore or more, or whose net profit is greater than or equal to rupees 5 crore. And these are all OR conditions. If any of the 3 conditions are satisfied, then in that situation the company will have to constitute what? The company will have to constitute a CSR committee. The company will have to constitute a CSR committee. Now, who will become a part of the CSR committee? So in this situation also we have seen different things. So 3 or more directors of the company, and out of which 1 shall be an independent director. This is the first requirement. However, if the company does not have any independent director, then in that situation, at least 2 or more directors. So at least 2 people, 2 directors shall become the form the CSR committee. So at least 2. Then if it is a private company which has only 2 directors, then what? Then both the directors, 2 directors shall constitute the CSR committee. And if it is a foreign company, at least 2 persons, and 1 shall be the person as specified under section 380. So these are the people who will form or who will comprise the CSR committee. Now, after understanding this, that which company is required to form CSR committee and how shall the CSR committee be comprised, we have understood what are the duties of the CSR committee. So what does the CSR committee do? CSR committee is going to formulate the CSR policy, they will make the CSR policy. Not only formulate the CSR policy, but they'll also list down the CSR activities which are to be carried out. So formulate CSR policy, list down the activities which are to be carried out, and also implement the CSR policy. This is what the CSR committee is going to do. They'll also make an annual action plan. How are they going to carry out the CSR activities? For that, they are going to make an annual action plan. Now, post this, we also understood what are the duties of the directors. So directors, what are they going to do? They'll make sure they'll approve the CSR policy. They'll make sure that the CSR activities are being undertaken by the company or not. That is the board's thing. Now, apart from it, let's understand what is the minimum spend required. What amount should be spent? What amount? So the minimum spend required is how much? minimum contribution it is 2% of average net profit of 3 preceding financial years. So what is the minimum amount of CSR contribution? 2% of the average net profit of immediately preceding 3 financial year, and if 3 years have not passed by since the incorporation of company, then whatever are the immediately preceding financial year will take the net profit of those years into consideration. So this is the minimum contribution, minimum amount which shall be spent by the company for its CSR activities. Now, where shall the company make this spend? Preferably preference should be given to local areas or area in which the company is carrying out its work or where the company is established. And also we have understood that admin overhead should not be greater than, shall not exceed 5% of total CSR expenditure. Admin overhead should not exceed 5% of the total CSR expenditure. Now, if the CSR spend is done, now two things may happen. We have now discussed about the amount which has to be spent. Now two things may happen here. One is amount spent is meeting the requirements, and second situation which comes up here is amount spent is less than the minimum requirement. Then what? If the amount spent is as per the requirement, then in the board's report we have a specific section where CSR reporting is done. So we'll do the CSR reporting in the board's report. Specific details, giving specific details. However, if the minimum amount is not spent, then again 3 situations may arise here. So if the minimum amount is not spent, then in that case, one, it has to be reported in board's report with reasons. As to why the minimum amount has not been spent. Reported with the board's report, in the board's report with reasons. Then whatever is the unspent amount, if that relates to an ongoing project, if the unspent amount relates to ongoing project, then what will be done? Then in that situation the amount will be transferred to unspent CSR account. In how many days? 30 days from end of financial year. In 30 days from the end of financial year the amount will be transferred. And for how many years the amount will remain there? For 3 years. It should be utilized in 3 financial years. However, if it is still unspent, then will transfer to fund specified in schedule 7. Will transfer it to the fund which is specified in schedule 7. However, if it relates to a project other than ongoing project, Then what? Then we will transfer it to Schedule 7 fund. Transfer to fund under Schedule 7 in how much time? 6 months from the end of financial year. Within 6 months from the end of financial year, we will transfer it to the fund specified in Schedule 7, and here we are going to transfer it in 30 days from the end of third financial year. 30 days from the end of third financial year, we are going to make this transfer. So this is overall the CSR reporting which is done and the provisions related to CSR reporting, and post this we have also understood about impact assessment. Impact assessment has to be done by which companies whose CSR obligation is greater than or equal to 10 crore, and they will appoint an independent agency, and this independent agency will check the projects. They will do an impact assessment for projects whose outlay is greater than 1 crore, greater than or equal to 1 crore, and have been completed not less than 1 year before the date of assessment. And then we have also seen the penalty which is imposed and activities specified under Schedule 7. So this was all in all a quick summary of section 135.
Before we start this video, do like and subscribe to our channel and not miss on any updates.